Very good. It's 1 o'clock. It is 1 o'clock, and so we will begin the EDIC meeting for today. We have a few items on the agenda, and we appreciate everybody for being here. We'll start out with number one, to approve the Tax Exempt Review Committee meeting minutes of the January 24th, 23 meeting. We had that sent to us ahead of time, and if there are any changes or corrections, please let us know, but otherwise we will accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from January 24th, 2023 meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number two, the Corvent property tax exemption application, and Jim Gilmore will get us started. Jim.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is introduce Ryan Osheim from the EDC to kind of explain this business and then have them talk about it, and then I can wrap up with the recommendation.
Thanks, Jim. Members of the committee. Ryan Osheim, Chief Business Development Officer with the Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development Corporation, and pleased to be here today to talk to you about an exciting company we've been working with. Met the team from Corvent medical device technology that's innovating in the ventilator technology and healthcare space. Met them in July of 2021, so almost 2 years ago. And I won't go through all of the details, but we were successful in helping them make a decision to locate their early stage company here in Fargo. They leased space, or currently leasing space in the Research and Technology Park in the R2 building. As was the plan, they're doing engineering and design work there, working closely with NDSU, enjoying that symbiotic relationship. And as their market grows and they're building out their sales opportunity and perfecting their technology, the next phase is then growing into the manufacturing side of the business. So that's kind of where we're at. The plan is going as designed. And so they're looking at space now in the West 45th Business Center, growing to 10,000 square feet. This is likely phase two of numerous phases of growth as their market continues to get built out. They are at 8 employees currently, and I'm going to bring the team up. They're going to tell you more about the company, this project, their future growth, and some of the talent that they're hiring here. And it's a really exciting story. It's really important to building out the biotech and bioscience industry. They're not only are they a great company, but they're a key part of building out this ecosystem. In year one, they're looking at adding 15 jobs. Year two, adding 26 jobs. These are all high paying, over $92,000 salary per job average in year one, and over $97,000 in year two, and that will grow over the 5 years, as you can see in your packet. This type of support is helpful to a company that is, largely venture backed right now as they go into a revenue phase in the coming years. And so every dollar is critical to fueling that growth. So I'm going to take a pause there, and I'm going to welcome up Richard Walsh, CEO with Corvent Medical. And I don't know if Travis is coming up, but if he does, Travis Murphy, CFO.
Ryan, while they're coming up, can I ask you a quick question? Could you just talk a little bit about how you came in contact with them and how that went? Yeah,
so I'm probably going to tell it wrong, but I would say it's through the network that we're building. So the Bioscience Industry Association of North Dakota, through some of the kind of core bioscience sector that's already been built. So Michael Chambers, John Ballantyne with Aldevron have grown kind of a network and a notoriety throughout the nation. And that's allowed us to get connections to other parts of the country where people are familiar with those names, and that leads kind of back to our network. And then we have an opportunity to engage with folks like Richard and Travis, and kind of sell them on why this market makes a lot of sense, why it's a good environment to grow your business. We've got access to the talent. We're close to a medical device hub in the Twin Cities, and so part of the huge battle with our work is getting people to visit, and so leveraging those networks is critical to doing that.
So Ryan, one more question. So did
Sure.
you have them visit not in the last 6 months, or did you have them visit last July or August?
So my initial interaction was July of 21, but Richard's got some pretty harrowing tales of a broke down car on the side of the road last winter, and I think it was 20 below with 30-mile-an-hour winds, and so they've decided to continue their journey here even after that.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to get off topic, but we like to think that builds character in people, and so, all right, sorry for the interruption.
No, that's great.
All right, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Mayor Mahoney and citizens of Fargo for giving me the opportunity to present and talk about Corvette Medical. My name is Richard Walsh. I'm President and CEO of Corvette Medical. We moved the company here in January of 2022. Our mission, we were born out of the pandemic. The U.S. government came to us, our founders, in March of 2020, and our founders were experts in medical devices, but specifically in the pulmonary area. The government asked us to start developing a low-cost, rapidly deployable ventilator that was easy to use but sophisticated enough to save the lives of patients afflicted with COVID. We did that. We did that in the state of California. I started with the company a couple months after the company was founded, and I made the decision that we weren't going to stay in the state of California. We were going to move the company. There's just too many roadblocks there for a small company to be successful. Probably about 6 months later, I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Richard Glidden, who runs the Bioscience Association of North Dakota. He brought us to Fargo, introduced us to Ryan and Joe and the team here. It was in July, and nobody told us about the snow, but we already knew about it. And I like to say that we're here because of the environment, and the climate. And it's not the climate or the environment outside, but it's the economic climate and environment here in North Dakota, but specifically in Fargo. We've really pivoted here in Fargo. We worry less about the economics of growing our business and more about contributing back into the ecosystem here. Last year, we hired 8 NDSU interns, of which we've hired permanently multiple interns. They're primarily engineers, software, electrical. This year, we have 8 more interns starting. 4 of them started last week. Another 4 will start in May. We have an agreement with NDSU now for their postdoc students. We've hired a postdoc student to work on a new project for us, not associated with ventilators, but with another technology. And some of their staff. We've worked very closely with UND also, Brian Tandy and the Bioscience Association, or the Biomedical Engineering Program up in Grand Forks. But we settled on Fargo because the community. We really became ingratiated with NDSU and the Bison environment, the community. I live downtown here on Broadway, not too far, obviously. We're going to grow the company to about 75 employees here in Fargo over the next 5 years. When we came here, we had a little bit of revenue going, and we had a technology that was already proven. We're developing a new technology now. It's a hospital-to-home ventilator. The future is hospital-to-home, moving the patients out of the hospital earlier and having them recover at home. We're actually, with the money we received from the Bioscience Association and LIFT and NDDF, that's allowed us to pivot and start developing these new technologies. And with the help of people like John Ballantyne and the guidance from John and his team, we've really started to grow the company. We're moving, we love being at NDSU, but NDSU just can't accommodate where we're going quickly. And in fact, Jim Booz and I had many discussions about how do we make it work here at NDSU. We love it, it's an anchor. But we decided that they didn't have the space, and so we're moving out to a little bit further outside of Fargo, and we're going from about 3,000 square feet to 17,000 square feet. in the first half of this year. In fact, I just hired a full-time chief operating officer who will be moving here from Jacksonville, Florida. I haven't told him about the snow yet, but he'll figure it out. He's moving his family up here later this year, early next year. But we're moving warehousing out of California now. So we have R&D here, we have admin here. We're moving warehousing now in the first half of the year from California. We'll be moving manufacturing in the second half of this year. So we'll be fully up and running by December 31st. We'll be completely out of California and here in Fargo, North Dakota. So we'll have warehousing, manufacturing, admin, sales and marketing, and R&D all here in Fargo. About 17,000 square feet. We've got a pipeline of about 5 more products that include transport ventilators, post-ICU ventilators, hospital home ventilators, CPAPs, BiPAPs. And what's really interesting about this space is that the vast majority of these products are no longer made in the United States. If you look at companies like Philips, that's a Dutch company. You look at Draeger, that's a German company. You look at Medtronic, that's an Irish company, right? They're all made, if they are made here in the United States, they're made by foreign companies. We're going to change that. We're going to change the ventilation respiratory business. We're going to bring it back and we're going to onshore it, and we're going to onshore it to Fargo, North Dakota. And I recently was in Bismarck, and some of the senators asked me, why North Dakota? And I said, because the value system here. Because our core values at Corvent are very much like the core values here in North Dakota. So we're really excited about being here. I think if we can get this abatement, that'll help us quite a bit. Because we do worry about the money, because we're still a startup, we're still fragile. But the climate and environment here allows us to prosper, and it's less encumbering, and it's more of an environment that allows us to grow and focus on the task at hand, which is creating jobs and building value in a company that's here in Fargo, North Dakota.
Thank you very much. That's a great, do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions? And maybe, Jim, you could go through the numbers for us real quickly. I guess the thing that jumps out at me, obviously the hourly wage for these jobs is tremendous. So to me, that's a good thing. But as far as the other specifics as to how long the incentive is for and what the amount will be.
Yeah, Commissioner Pepcorn, the number of jobs, as Brian noted, in year one, they're looking at 23 and up to 46 by year. Year one is 23, and then up by year three, we're up to 46. The score is very good. The property tax exemption is worth about $17,000 a year, and it would just be for 5 years. So it kind of helps them get that early start, like a lot of businesses need. So it's not a large incentive. It's for any small company. It's an important one.
Does anybody have any questions? Mayor.
And Jim, just for people watching, the points they come up as 146, and you normally need 100, so they have outdone the 100 by a great margin. I remember when you guys came here, you said we might get this manufacturing going, so I'm glad you stuck around and found a place to do it. And I think from our position, this is fantastic. You're bringing good jobs into town. And for many of you who haven't seen it, they have great ventilator. It's a really nice, compact issue. And even a surgeon can run it. It's so simple. So if any of you guys have trouble, I could keep you alive. So I'd move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I guess Joe Razo was in the audience. I like the ring of coming to Fargo for the climate. That's a pretty good, there's a little bit of irony in that, but that's, I kind of like that. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you.
Very good. Moving on to number 3, the NP Apartments. That's pages 13 through 28. And Jim, you can start us out with that one.
Yeah, this is a project that the City Commission gave approval to in last fall. The major components are there's sort of 3 main sections to this building, and they're all integral and really essential to each other. You can't really do one without the other. So the city's interest was in having a another parking garage downtown as part of a mixed-use development. We'd done a parking study and looked like long-term, we needed about 450 parking spaces in this location in order to, support other development. Also important to this is there's 167 apartments that would be on the upper floors. What the image you're looking at is the main floor. If you look at this, would be apartments and the upper floors along NP, as well as back behind the building with the theater in between. The community theater, I think, would also be a great asset for the downtown. It's going to bring people downtown. As you know, the Fargo-Moorhead Community Theater has been in Island Park for many decades, and because of structural problems, they were having to leave. And so this is an opportunity to keep it downtown. This way they don't need to build any parking. Their parking needs are evenings and weekends, and the office parking needs are during the day, and the apartments are more, some during the day, but more heavily into the evening. So it's a good mix of uses on one site. Our agreement with Kilbourne allowed them to apply for property tax incentives of up to 10 years total, the first being a 5-year Renaissance Zone exemption. That's already been recommended for approval by the Renaissance Zone Authority. They were also allowed to apply for up to a 5-year kind of TIF exemption where they would be able to get their property taxes back. This will also be part of a TIF district, so once that exemption is up, then that revenue would be available to help pay for the parking garage. So again, it's all one big piece. Maybe what I'll do now is just ask Keith Lear from Kilbourne to show you probably some better images of this project, and then we have available online. PFM, our financial advisor, has looked at this project and made the determination that really without these incentives, the apartments, you really don't work financially, and I'll let him go over that report after Keith speaks.
There we go. Thank you, Jim. As Jim said, I'm Keith Lear, Vice President of Development and Construction for Kilbourne Group, and I'm the lead, called Owner's Rep or Development Project Manager on this project. As Jim said, progress continues on this project. We are hustling right along with the design phases of this project, ultimately aligning with some milestones that show up from our developers agreement. But kind of a quick snapshot of this project. Again, some of this is a little bit redundant from what Jim was just talking about, but main floor of the building, Northern Pacific Avenue along the north side. We have the railroad tracks along the south side, and then this private alley along the east, and Renaissance Hall on the west. And so working with this site, there's a lot of constraints around working with the partnering projects. Global Development, who is the owner of the old Broadway, the Herbst building, and the private alley, and one of the current parcels that the sites are on, they're an integral part to this coordination effort. The city, the other parcel owner that's more on the west half of the site, being a component of this, but then also working with Renaissance Hall, making sure not only are we minimizing the impact to their operations, their students, and everything that's happening there, but then also looking at long-term and how are we enhancing our relationship with them and on this block. And then all of those partners together, working with condo associations in the 12 Broadway building, a new set of owners that are in the 6 Broadway building, and if that wasn't enough, then we have to coordinate with the railroad to make this thing happen as well. So a lot of challenges as we're moving forward, but we're making good progress and getting this all to come together. A little bit of a blown up view of the main floor here. As Jim mentioned, the partnership the public-private partnership really is between the Kilbourne Group entity, GP NP Holdings, and then the City of Fargo. The City of Fargo will maintain ownership of the parking ramp in this space, and then We will develop and own the mixed-use component of it. And then the main mixed-use component is the FM Community Theater, who's very much engaged and going through the design process as well. But they have about 32,000 square feet on the main floor of this building. That's about a 350 seat theater is what they're planning to do in this, plus classroom spaces and training spaces and office facilities. As you start to go up the building, you'll see this is where kind of the typical apartment layouts start. The structure of the roof of the theater proper space sort of lives in the middle of this kind of courtyard area, and then the different studios through 3-bedroom mix of apartment units continue up through the rest of the building. So that's levels 2 through 6. And then this was as the theater drops away, this continues on levels 3 through 6 all the way up the floor. So a couple different images. So this is from the northwest looking back at the building. Flip through these. This is from the northeast, kind of the Broadway corridor looking back at the building. You can see the public parking ramp entrance here. The building is hiding for the most part the parking ramp, which is kind of a design goal of this whole thing. This would be from sort of the main intersection, Main and Broadway intersection, looking back at the building, so across the tracks from the southeast. And then here, this is about the 8th Street and Railroad intersection, looking at the building, so from the southwest. Some things we're looking at here, just to point out some anomalies. This is the fly loft. It's sort of a kind of a precast element, but we'll have some sort of art or design element to it. But that really is facilitating for the stage and we'll call it the props and the stuff that's going on with the theater space. Project summary, just real quickly. So total project area. So this is all the entire project. Is about 366,000 square feet. Of that, about 155,000 is the residential component of the project. 172,000 square feet is the parking component. And as Jim mentioned, we're right around 160 stalls in the parking ramp. There's about 36,000 total square feet of the theater, and then about 3,000 square feet of retail. Total project cost right now, trending is about 61 million. That's 36,000 for the, or excuse me, 36 million for the mixed use. About 5 million. That's just the theater's core and shell component of it. They have a fit out on top of that. They're working on their budgets for the fit out component of it as well. And then we're hovering just below the $20 million parking ramp number that we're holding for our guaranteed project cost on the project. Construction start for the project, we're targeting this summer. Yet we're hoping to open this in phases. So the ramp component about 14 months after we start construction. So that's somewhere in the fall of 24. And then the mixed use component somewhere around 28 or 26 to 28 months, but we're thinking that's later in 2025 right now. Any questions for me?
Can I ask a couple of questions? So Keith,
Sure.
if you could go back a couple slides. So will the apartments have access to the parking? It doesn't really show that there. How will that work?
Yeah, so there'll likely be, yes, there will be a parking connection to it. The main elevator core for the parking ramp is up in the northeast corner. That position is really about connectivity to the MP Avenue corridor and sort of all the activity that's happening on the MP Avenue side. But within that elevator lobby, we intend to have a secured access point that would also be able to dump into the residential as well.
So that's going to be the only access to the apartments. I guess on some of the other parking ramps, we've had more access points, but that's kind of your concept for this one?
Yep. Yeah. We try to kind of maintain as the least amount of access as possible to it. There's potential, maybe if there's a second component here, we're looking at that more of as a construction logistics entry point. That would be so we could break the building in half and sort of open one side of the building, still have access to the other side. That's to be determined. And then the other one is on the ground floor. We're careful about how the theater is connected to this space. There's a convenience level because there's people going to the theater every day working from that. So we're thinking maybe there's an opportunity for sort of a back of house entry point for the theater. But we don't want people to just hide within the structure when they're coming here. It's not very far away. We want them to come out of the ramp, go down the street, and then come back into the theater space, making sure that the city is capitalizing on that extra energy that's here on this site as well.
And if you don't mind, so Jim, can you talk a little bit about, so it's a 5-year, the Renaissance Zone, and this is a 5-year TIF, so it's 10 years combined. Can you talk a little bit about how that works, and then the TIF?
Yeah, with the Renaissance Zone, they simply won't pay property taxes on the apartment space, the retail space, and then the theater would also not pay property taxes for the first 5 years. The theater, because it's a nonprofit type organization, they pay a property tax that's much lower anyway because of their nonprofit and the type of use that they have. So for the first 5 years, the Renaissance Zone, they would not pay property taxes. The second 5 years, whatever property taxes they do pay would be paid back to them. We would have a note, and so if, depending on the level, there's a cap on the dollar amount on that. I forget what that is off the top of my head, but they'll explain that. And then, Matt is on next. He'll explain just kind of that but-for report, how he reviewed that. He's available virtually.
Okay, can I just, so I'm going to do, you have to bear with me because math is not my strong point, so, but can you talk, so after these expire, then how much will the property taxes paid to the city? I can't remember the number off the top of my head. Is it 450? Or was it 350 a year?
I think it's more about 350,000 a year, and that will go into the TIF that will help pay for the parking ramp bonds for probably another 10 to 15 years beyond that.
Okay, I got you. So now here, I'm going to tell you a good story. So 60 years ago, Jim found a picture in the paper of the original building when it was torn down in 1962, and it says, "Making the way for progress." And so it's taken 60 years. And this, first of all, this is an awesome project. But so right now they're paying $6,000 a year property taxes for 60 years. Do you know how much that is? $240,000. So for the past 60 years. So do you know how much it would be, their new tax rate? Let's say if we paid that for 60 years, do you know what that is? Once again, math is not my strong point. $21 million. So think of that. So even though, it's been sitting there empty and people say, oh, it'll get developed. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it won't unless we help. And so to me, this is an awesome example. So $21 million, think of that, that goes to property taxes that would have been paid to the city for things. So that's just phenomenal. So that's the end of my sermon for today. I would just stop the show after that because that's kind of a mic drop. All right, go ahead, Jim.
I do have a question on parking. I'm just curious whether it's Jim or Keith. What's the net gain in parking spaces versus the number of surface spots right now versus the roughly 465 in the new structure?
I think the surface is about 240 right now, so
Okay.
it's a net gain of about 200 at this site. The apartments will, use some
Right.
of that, maybe up to half. What we find with apartments is that, not everyone leases a space, and a lot of people are gone for work during the day, so then that
Right.
space is available for offices.
But even if everyone in the apartment had one car in the parking structure, we're still plus about 100 roughly. So that's
Mayor.
Just have my rough calculation, the cost for stalls about 43,000. 20 million divided by 463.
Yeah, and that-
And is that just because of location? I know we've done other parking garages with space, 30, 35 a space. It just is the space and what you have to do?
Yes, space constraints is one of them. More significantly, there's been a tremendous amount of construction cost escalation in the last 2-3 years, especially in this market. And then the site as well is challenging from a site standpoint. You go back to why it hasn't been developed in 20 years. I mean, just yesterday we got notification from some of our deep foundation guys, like there's subterranean slabs that are 26 feet down that we got to go get and pull out of this. There's contaminated soil all over the place in here. So we're trying to be careful with our budgets and understanding that there's some stuff in here we know that we have to go get, and it's going to be a more expensive site to develop because of that. So.
And Jim, when you presented this to the commission, we had to hit certain timetables, certain costs. So far, we're on site, we're on time and on cost.
Yeah, I believe we're on cost right now. We're at, not to exceed 20 million is the kind of the benchmark we're looking at, and for interest rates to stay below 7%. So those are the two things. I think we're on track for meeting both of those. Well, I'll turn it over to Matt next, but the other concept here is why, these parking ramps, when they're downtown, you kind of got to, put them in a shoe. It's hard to fit them in. We're looking at a parking ramp up at the airport where there's sort of unlimited space. And so the shorter a parking ramp is, which means there's more turns, it becomes less efficient and more expensive per parking space, where if you can have a parking ramp that's 2 blocks long, that's much more efficient, but just doesn't fit in the downtown environment. So.
And then lastly, I think I really like the partnership with the FM Theater. I mean, it really, you guys have thoughtfully thought out how to put the apartments around that, and we'll make it a premier spot. I think that will outshine what Island Park was before, so it really looks like you've been thoughtful in that development, so thank you.
I just had one question on the west side of the building. I thought I saw a garage door. Is that access for the theater to move equipment in and out?
Potentially, we're actually looking at it more because they do so much of educational stuff and things with kids, looking at an opportunity to bring in natural light to the backside of their stage. So it really is meant to be kind of a clear story, glass structure back there from a natural light standpoint. And they're sort of crossing their fingers long-term, looking at an opportunity, and this is very preliminary, but open the stage up and reverse it, and then have outdoor performances on the back side of the building too. So something we've been talking with NDSU and FMCT about, and how can we reprogram that space as well.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Matt, are you available? Do you want to go through your report real quick?
Yeah, certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. PFM looked at this project. We looked at just the apartments and retail portion, because that's what we'll be receiving the TIF here. And just as a quick review, PFM creates our own pro forma based off of what is provided from the developer and based off of what PFM believes are accurate assumptions or reasonable assumptions. And then we look at two metrics: the internal rate of return and then the debt service coverage. So for this project, as my report states, the internal rate of return we have at just over 10% without public assistance, and with public assistance we're about 12.7%. And again, for a project like this, 10 to 15%, probably closer to the 15, maybe even higher percent for a project like this. So they're really on the very low end of what might be acceptable for something like this, with both with and without public assistance. But I think the biggest factor here is the debt service coverage. So really, we have their debt service coverage without public assistance is essentially under, for several years, under 1 times coverage. So they're not even able to meet any debt covenants or even to pay their debt. Oftentimes, the lender is going to want to see that in the 1.2 times range. With assistance, it does get a little bit better. You're above the kind of the 1.1. I think Kilbourne is a very well-known company. They may be able to get away with lower covenants from the bank on their debt service coverage. And then finally, I just looked at looking at some sensitivity. What happens if the cost of the project changes, or they implement higher rental rates than stated in the pro forma? We estimate $1 million or 13.5% for the project to become viable without public assistance. And as you heard the gentleman say earlier, we're not really in an environment where prices are coming down right now. So we don't really think that that's realistic at this point. The second sensitivity scenario we look at is bringing down, or I'm sorry, increasing rental rates. Those have to increase about 11% over and above what they stated, and that's a large increase. We don't think that would necessarily be occurring right now, and kind of would push some of that affordability up as well. Then we look at the combination of the two, and project would have to increase by about 7%, and rental rates, or I'm sorry, project costs would have to be reduced by about 7%, and rental rates would have to increase by about 5%. Maybe the rental could increase could happen, but we don't see both of those things occurring at this time. So we do, as our report states, we do think that this project would not be viable but for the public assistance in the form of the Renaissance Zone abatement, and then the TIF dollars in years 6 through 10. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Lucas?
Yeah, just one question. As I'm looking at the rental rates that are stated in the return analysis, I guess I'm wondering, what is the, either from Keith or who's on the call, actually, I forgot the gentleman's name.
Yeah, it's Matt Schnecklenberg.
Sorry about that, Matt. Either from Keith or Matt, I'm wondering if you could touch on if there was any looking into fulfilling those and those rents, because looking at that, it's $3,000 roughly for a 3-bedroom apartment. Is that what you're seeing downtown right now, able to fill those types of apartments?
Yeah, so there's a projection into that, right? I mean, we're looking at kind of end of 25 and then early 26 type of lease up standpoint. So there's escalation based on what the current market is.
And what's that escalation, do you assume?
I think we're assuming 3%.
3%?
3 or 3.5. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I maybe have more of a comment. When looking at the access for parking, as a mom with 3 kids, if I was going to try to do an apartment like that, to walk all the way around every day, multiple times a day, to have access to a vehicle would be extremely frustrating. And if we're going to do it right after, 60 some years, probably want to do it the best we can to keep tenants long term. So that's just a comment.
From a circulation standpoint, like if you parked in the ramp, right? So yeah, so there's, right, we talked about that a little bit earlier. If there's, make sure you're understanding this. So if this is a typical hotel floor, or excuse me, apartment floor, there would be access here into the primary corridor for the space.
So then,
directly from a parking level.
okay, so you'd have access to that 3, but you'd walk all the way through the hallway, all the way down, and all the way over to hit the other 3-bedroom.
If you were staying in this 3-bedroom?
Yep.
Yes, you would have to, yeah, because the ramp has, this is the story that lines up, right? And the ramp splits, so this end of the ramp is a half story on this side. So yeah, there's a trade-off there. It would be, another elevator corridor or something like that associated with it. I mean, there's an inconvenience associated with that for sure, but it's sort of the best we could work with.
And how's the analysis for noise, knowing that the railroad is, we have tracks? You're not going to get much from the theater because it's open top, so that shouldn't transfer over. But how is that analysis going to make sure that there's reduced noise as much as possible?
Yeah, we aren't going to hide the fact that the train's going by, obviously. No. So we are upgraded acoustics along the south side of the building here and wrapping the corner, so that's kind of the direct line of sight. And then actually the north face up here as well, the exterior wall and the windows are being treated as well, understanding that's a pretty popular area, kind of on the weekends when bars let out. The theater space, we have a consultant group on board that's for the global development, both of our acoustic pieces of it and then the theater's acoustic pieces of it. So the theater has acoustic separations between our building. And then we're also, actually, I think it was supposed to happen this week. We have vibration monitoring going on the site. So they're paying attention to how does a train actually affect the site before this is built. So we're doing our best to accommodate the acoustics within the space. And we realize that's a sensitive thing for people.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions? Otherwise, I think we're ready for a motion if someone's ready.
I'll make a motion to the TIF and Renaissance zone for this project.
Yeah, but it'd actually be the 5-year TIF that we're looking for a
right, the
recommendation on,
TIF.
so.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations. And next item is Jim with House Bill 1215, giving us an update. Jim.
This is a bill that passed the legislature. It was one that they were referring to as part of some paperwork reduction acts. What they did was, if you're looking at the bill, the key part is in section 6, where they repeal that particular section of the Century Code. And what they repealed was the requirement for business incentive agreements. So if with this bill beginning August 1, cities are no longer required to have them. We can still have them, and I think our plan is that we would still have an agreement with the businesses that they would create a certain number of jobs. However, the businesses would no longer have to report to the state, and the city would no longer have to be submitting reports to the state. So I think in some ways we welcome this. Usually the legislature's giving us more things to do and more restrictions. So this is less. So wanted you to be aware of that. And then as we look at, or we restructure our business incentive agreements, and we can make them more just for what the city needs, not necessarily everything that the state is asking for.
Are there any questions about that? I guess, Jim, the main thing is, that is one of the questions that we ask when we have these forums. And to me, and obviously we work with Economic Development Corporation and things like that. So we still, from my perspective, we still want to know, so how will that work?
I mean, we'll still have an agreement with the business like we do now and have them report to us, because I think that's important information that you'll want to have and the public will want to show that these projects are successful and we're having a positive impact on the community as far as job creation and property tax increases. So.
Any other questions? Mayor?
Jim, can you also update us on the Renaissance Zone bill? Is that going to get through, and what changes would that mean for this board?
Yeah, that has passed both houses and it's on its way to the governor. There are several changes. Probably the most significant ones are that the Renaissance Zone property tax and income tax exemption can now be given for 8 years rather than 5 years. So that's probably an important change. The other is that the city can have a second kind of island or satellite district. We have one of those right now. It's up in the Oak Grove area where they're doing a housing project. And so the Renaissance rules, otherwise all the blocks have to be connected. That gets to be a bit of a board game at times. So you can have one separate, now we can have two separate. So you can have two separate zones up to 3 blocks each. And so I think there'll be a lot of interest in that. Should we do some on South University or West Main, where else in the community might we want to take a spot and try to encourage some redevelopment and work with some businesses on that. So that'll be part of a Renaissance Zone plan update. The only other two more minor changes are that we used to have to update our Renaissance Zone plan every 5 years. Now we can get one that'll run for 10 years. And then there's the remodeling exemption. If you're remodeling a building, you only can get an 8-year exemption if you do 75% of the value. But if you do 50% of the value, you're still limited to a 5-year exemption. So that was the other amendment.
Can I ask you, Jim, so you talked about these remote Renaissance Zone areas. So the one that's in Oak Grove, so that stays alive, is it until they've paid off theirs, and then could that move to a different location?
It can move. You can move it as soon as you consider the block completed. There is a vacant lot there that hasn't been built on yet. So, but once it's completed, we could move it somewhere else. We've done that downtown. As a block is completed, then you can move it somewhere else, because I think we're limited to 43 blocks, something like that. And there's like 100 blocks downtown, so we have moved those around a little bit. If a block is completed and has no additional potential, we can move that. We don't have to wait until the exemption expires. We can simply do it when the project is completed.
So if you don't mind, so then that apartment, once it gets constructed and once it starts being rented out or however, that's the definition of being completed?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or, thank you for that update. We appreciate that. And then if it's okay, then we don't take action on that, but we'll just move on. The last item on our agenda, discuss the public-private partnership policy.
Yeah, this was a policy we adopted in 2021. It's kind of a rework of all our policies. And this has to do with public-private partnerships, and it's kind of a one-page policy. It leaves a lot of flexibility in some ways. However, it's restrictive in that, we were trying to limit these public assistance to areas where it was essential, so that if it was a greenfield development, we weren't going to be that supportive of, redevelopment incentives. And, typically the site was going to be more difficult to develop. Well, there's a kind of a different set of circumstances now with the proposed development of this water park by Epic out in the Anderson Field. The site is not hard to develop. It's pretty much all greenfield, but the real challenge there is to try to get some, parking. We were just talking about the cost of parking lots there. And so, the parking in this case would certainly benefit the development and allow them to be denser, but it would also benefit the park district because it would be right next to an arena, the softball diamond, the zoo's not that far away. And so I think that, their question, my question is to you, are we open to considering those types of redevelopment requests where you're creating a public amenity with the incentive money versus, just trying to help the developer, financially? And before they would come in and apply, I'd want to really have some general discussion on the overall policy. If we stay the way it is, or we sort of open the door a little bit, because there's another developer that's interested in something, I'll just say similar to the water park, where you're, building a parking garage that might benefit, public properties. So I want to get your thoughts on that, maybe have some discussion. If you're open to it, we don't need to take any action today. I could simply bring back some alternatives to consider at the next meeting, but I didn't want to spend time writing on those up if you're not really open to those ideas.
And so I think this is kind of the first for us to see it, and so I think it's just something for us to all think about and maybe discuss. And we weren't going to take any action today, but it's just something down the road for us to think about, because obviously it's economic development. Well, that's the question for us. Where do we want to, what do you want to focus on, and what do you consider an economic thing? I guess from my perspective, after this last winter, like if you're a family with kids, an indoor water park would be a very good attraction for a lot of things. But to me, that's the debate. Is that something that we should participate in? Or I guess so. Is that what you had in mind, that you were going to introduce it today, and then we'll kind of talk about it in the next whatever upcoming time?
I thought at the next meeting I'll bring back some revisions that you could consider, and then you could consider requests and talk about the water park specifically at that time. Blake from Epic is here. If you do have questions about the water park, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. But we can get into more detailed requests. But right now, if I read this, I'd kind of tell them, it's a kind of a long shot, but we can't change our policy. It's not carved in stone. So I'll bring something back to the next meeting if you're comfortable with that. I know we will have another TIF request at the next meeting, as well as maybe one other application. So.
And I think if it's okay, instead of putting him on the spot to have him come up and talk right now, I think what would be preferable is after this, if we could maybe individually visit with them. I think that'd be good, just to see how what their vision is and things like that. But I do think this is something that we as a group have to weigh in on and mull over to decide what direction we want to go. And so, any other comments about that? Go ahead, Jim.
Just, I guess one other item, I did arrange for a tour of Bruhala on Thursday. That's a project that you approved a couple of years ago as a tax increment financing district. I've kind of been into the market part, but I'm kind of anxious to see what the hotel and the meeting space looks like. So if you're unable to make the meeting, I think we're going to try to have a follow-up tour for the people that can.
Do we get free beer on the tour?
I don't think so.
We won't stop.
Well, thank you, and I hope everybody can make it. Obviously, we know everybody's got busy schedules, but thank you, Jim, for organizing that. And obviously, I think it's a great addition to our community. And so that goes a little bit to our discussion about what the previous item. So with that, it's 1:50. Thank you, everybody, for coming this afternoon, and we are adjourned.